I'm here with Michael deMeng, who is chopping the heads off of things. But really, Michael, it's to make these really wonderful creations.
Yep. What I like to do is I like to use wedding toppers, or actually any sort of figurine, and mix them up a little bit. Sometimes they're with skeletal things, sometimes they're with little animal toys, but make them so they're not so typical.
That's cool. So how do we start this project?
Well, the first part of it is actually the funnest part of it, because we get to do a little Marie Antoinette action with these, because we basically put these little guys. We've got a couple little figurines here, like, oh, here's a nice, oh, I've graduated from high school. Okay, well, not anymore, but he goes, you're going to the guillotine. So for
is
that,
this just as a clamp or something?
yeah, just have a clamp. If you have a vise, that's great. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to put them in a clamp, and then we're going to get a rotary tool. And anytime you use a rotary tool, eyewear, we don't want sticky things in your eyes. So we are going to move this out of the way. These are, of course, the leftover heads from the time before.
Now, this is just a plastic figurine. I assume wedding toppers come in plastic and other materials.
They do. So ideally what you want is plastic. There are cut-off wheels for things like ceramic, but it's a whole lot harder. So ideally, if you can track down a resin or a plastic one, perfect. All right, so, and off with his head.
So is that head going to go flying, or is it a pretty controlled process?
Well, I would hope it's controlled, but it's you never know.
I noticed that you're actually rotating it instead of just coming straight through in one direction.
Well, that's mostly to make it even, and so that's ideally going to make it a little less likely to come flying off.
And it actually smells a little bit like the plastic is melting.
Well, that's because it is. What you get with plastic is you get what's called molten goobers. So,
is that a technical term?
That's a technical molten goobers, and so that's what these little things are, molten goobers, because the plastic does actually melt. So he is now ready for action. Now, of course, I would do the same thing with our little Scullies too, because in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make maybe a graduate of life.
I was going to say.
So we'll do the same thing.
Oop, I'll get that for you.
Thanks. So I'm going to put him in the clamp.
Now, with something like the skeleton, I notice you have to put it at a bit of an angle, and it doesn't matter.
No, however sort of fits is going to be the best. So in this one, it will be a really easy. I could practically get rid of this with,
I was going to say even scissors or something like that, because it's a really thin neck, but you don't really want to ruin your scissors.
Well, that's
better to use a tool.
Too. So we're going to just do off with his head. This will be an easy one. Boom. Like so. Okay. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to make this go on to here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rotary tool. I'm going to put in a little drill bit.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes, it is. And then I'm going to...
So if you're drilling plastic, are you using the same kind of bit that you would use to drill wood or anything else?
Mostly yes. I would say most of the time that's true.
So this is interesting also, the way that you use the drill parallel or to the table instead of, I think of always a drill as coming down.
Well, part of that is safety, because if I have my hand here and my hand here, I have a little more control. Like my hand is like not going to
and this is really wobbly, I would assume, so coming from the top a little bit more difficult.
Correct. So what I'm going to do is the same thing. I need to put a little hole in the base of his skull. So I'm just going to kind of...
Oh, that's such a small piece, it's scary, but I see that your fingers are completely out of the way.
Right?
You've wedged yourself on the table, you're completely in control.
And obviously, if you're really nervous, a vise of some kind is always going to be the best thing to do. So now...
Good advice.
Good. Oh, you are a witty one. All right, so get rid of that. We don't need that thing anymore. All we need are these things. Now, what we need, wire. You ready for trickiness?
I'm ready for some devious action.
Okay, so I'm going to run the wire in there, and since this is hollow, I'm going to make a stopper. And that can't go anywhere.
So then it keeps it from pulling out, I say.
And we'll snip that. Stand back. Woo.
Safety glasses on.
Yeah, now they're coming off, but we're okay. Now I have one that I pre-drilled too, so and I have some little wire here.
So if it wasn't hollow, you wouldn't need to go to that whole process we just did. You'd be able to simply stick it in like you just did there.
Exactly. So like this one, like that, right?
And boom, you have your figurine. And if I just hold this up for a second, you can see here I have my little skeleton, and he's just reading his book left and right, left and right.
Absolutely. And if I tell you what, if you can manage to have him do that, you'll really be jamming. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab a 2-part epoxy. epoxy clay, and we're going to mush it together, and we're going to use it as an adhesive.
Cool.
All right, and we happen to have some
There
right
you
here,
go.
and so we're going to get equal parts. And we don't need a lot of it, but I'm just going to quickly mix this. Now, one thing that I need to do when I'm mixing this stuff is I really need to put gloves on. And
of course, you can follow all of the manufacturer safety instructions that are on your
they're
two-part
listed on there.
epoxy
Yeah,
clay,
they're
and
listed.
You know what to do.
Each product's going to have a slightly different thing. So just read them, see what they say, and then.
I always think the thing that's so interesting to me is I say since I've become an artist, I've become a chemist. Because I'm fascinated by what makes things work and knowing all that information. And people, I think, don't think about reading labels, but it really makes a difference when I'm going through like the craft store, looking at stuff. I like to know what's in it so I can kind of figure out what it is that it's going to do. Predict things a little better.
There's a couple reasons to actually read the label. First off, it's for safety, knowing what it's going to potentially do to you and all that other stuff. But the other reason is because if you don't read the label, often you're not using it right. So if you actually read the label, it might actually do things that it's supposed to do. So
that's a great point, because sometimes you know it for one use, but actually a product has multiple uses.
Right, absolutely.
So this is a clay, and I assume we're going to be molding.
We're going to be molding, and what we're going to use it more as an adhesive.
Okay.
And so now this is mixed, so this should be okay to handle.
So now it's one color. It was two colors.
Correct. And so now this will take about 2.5 hours to cure, so I have that much time to work with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach it here, and then I'm going to plunk, whoops, my drilled guy's head onto here.
So you
like
have
so.
all that excess clay. Do you leave it there as
You
a
can,
collar?
or you could decorate it. You could press things into it. You could also grind it down and carve it. So if you have a rotary tool, you can carve it down, and then we'll do the same thing with this guy. Now, there's another really cool thing that we can do with this. So after you get this on here, let's just plunk that.
So it's going to take 2.5 hours for this to set up, and then those two parts will be glued together permanently.
Yeah, and the more you can get them attached, the better it's going to stay. So in other words, the more I can bring the clay around it, the better that will be. So another thing to do is a process called Schlurbergerbering.
I'm sorry.
Schlurbergerbering.
Schlurbergerbering. That's just fun to say.
Yes, it is fun to say. So Schlurbergerbering is something I invented the name, not the process. So Schlurbergerbering, what I can do is I can take this and I can water it down and use it as sort of a primer on this. So with this, I just get it a little bit wet.
Yes.
And it creates this nice milkiness. You see all that milkiness?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wait, I've done some traditional clay work. It wasn't epoxy clay, but it was just traditional clay. And I know that this is kind of like a slurry technique where you get things to bond.
Correct. And so we are
I had no idea.
And slurry.
We're Schlurbergerbering.
Exactly. So you see, you get all that milky stuff on there.
Yeah.
And then when that cures, that will be
so
very, very paintable.
So you're not even putting the clay on there. You're putting like the residue, the Schlurbergerbery of the clay. That's such a cool idea. And it'll be a great service for painting plastic, which is one of those tough things to paint.
Really hard to paint. Really hard to paint. But Schlurbergerbering.
Schlurbergerbering makes it possible.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yep. So we've Schlurbergerbered, and this guy will get Schlurbergerbered. And then once they're Schlurbergerbered, then we can of course paint them, or we can mount them on a little thingy. We can say, oh, he's going to go on here, and I can build a little platform for him to stand out of the clay.
So you're actually going to use that as adhesive and building a platform. And if we look at this wonderful sort of Franken-cat here, Catman.
That's right.
I can see that right here, it almost looks like a piece of wood, but I assume it's made out of clay.
It's made out of clay, and I've pressed little design patterns in there. So like you can see, you can take almost anything, even a rib cage,
and
to make the clay.
And it becomes a texture tool.
Correct.
I love this. You're so creative, Michael. Thank you.